Welcome to FAA Safety Briefing Live, the March and April edition. I'm Paul Prydecker, and once again, I'm joined by my colleague and friend, Susan Parson. Hi, Susan.
Hi, good evening, Paul.
Thank you for making the trip here to facilitate this. We're doing our very best to get a little bit of social distancing here between us.
We decided against the upstairs, downstairs thing that probably would have been a little awkward.
So the feature issue is all about weather technology in the cockpit. And Susan, as always, we do a little review of how to earn wings credit and also AMT credit. How do they do that?
Yeah, on the screen that you'll see there, you can click on the buttons and you can link to previous podcasts. So if you haven't, if you've missed one and you want to get wings credit for it, you can still listen and take the quiz and get credit. There's a link to the print copy. So lots of ways to do it. And I do write the quizzes with the idea that we hope you read the magazine, but we try to make sure that we address all the issues in the quiz in this program. But the main thing is learn. And that's what we're looking to do. So by all means, take advantage of the wings credit.
That's great. And so this magazine is going to be about weather, but in general, can you state, as you often do, the mission of FAA Safety Briefing Magazine?
Yeah, you see it right there on the screen. We have a specific mission statement for every single one of our regular departments. We try to structure the feature articles around whatever our chosen theme is for the issue. And those are our main goals: to raise awareness of FAA resources, which your tax money pays for, explain safety and regulatory issues, because the FAA can do that in a way that nobody else can. And the most important thing for us, because this is dear to both of us, is encourage continued training. A good pilot is always training and always learning, and we want to. So we hope that this program and this publication will help you do that.
I think every opportunity we have in the airplane, or any chance that we're talking with our colleagues about flying, is an opportunity for learning. And I look at every flight and every mistake that I might make as a gift to learn and do better, and to tell other people about as well. So and the other thing that's certainly happened with the magazine over the past several months is the change in design. Your team does a wonderful job on the design and the graphics, so it's a pleasure to read. We have a lot of we have a lot of fun putting it together, and we also have a lot of fun with the designer. So let's move on to the cover. If you haven't seen it, this is quite a spiffy cover. We aimed for a combination in this cover picture of an aircraft that has some of the older equipment that is more typical. It's not your full glass cockpit, but you notice that there's a panel-mounted GPS navigator, and there's handheld gadgets, and the whole idea is that we have a lot of opportunities nowadays for different kinds of weather technology in the cockpit, but having it and knowing what to do with it and how to use it properly and appropriately to keep yourself safe, that's what we're really focusing on in this issue. So you'll see a list of our feature articles there. So what are some of the features tonight?
Well, we're going to talk about what is WITIC, and we'll define that when we get into it. Sabrina Woods, Dr. Sabrina Woods now, is one of our magazine alums. She moved on, but when she left us, we made her promise that she would continue to write for us, and she has kept that promise. So she's got Mind the Gap, which is a fun piece. Although we're starting to get into spring, Wisconsin's still cold, so Operation Icicle is useful, and we'll be talking about some of these other things. I'll also give you a little hint about Straight from Steve. We had an interview a couple months ago with our new administrator, and so we're introducing him in this issue. That's great.
So
let's go.
Let's get on to the first article, which is the Jump Seat column by Rick Domingo, and how's the weather? I mean, it's a question that pervades our normal conversation, but certainly it's a common conversation in the pilot group. So there's some interesting points here about weather, what we do with it, the technology, the information that we get, but also the decisions that we make about flying in weather and trying to interpret the information. So
Well, with this one starts out, Rick, my boss, his background is in airworthiness rather than in flying as a pilot. But one of the things he starts out with is, okay, so for pilots, even if you have an instrument rating, it's not safe to fly in all weather conditions. And that includes if you're flying a well-equipped airplane, because there are some conditions you just absolutely can't go into.
Well, oftentimes the weather is bigger than the airplane.
There's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
But he points out that mechanics, particularly those who work, on icy, cold, windy ramps or boiling hot ones, as Arizona summertimes can be. If you have to fix an airplane and you got to do it out in the open, weather is an issue for all of us, and so we try to make sure that we cover the entire aviation community. And
a sort of a new term on this topic has been introduced about UMC.
Yeah, that was unfriendly meteorological conditions. So an unfriendly condition, it doesn't have to be instrument meteorological conditions. It could be something that affects, say, density, altitude, turbulence, crosswinds. Mm-hmm. I think you told me you had a fairly interesting one the other day.
Amarillo is a windy place, folks. Yeah, so it was interesting.
If it had been Oklahoma, I remember when I was flying there, understanding why that song about wind comes sweeping down the plane. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that now. So anyway,
and a lot of focus on this particular issue in tonight's broadcast is about the technology we can use, and also some of the decision making we can use. So, shall we continue on and talk about WITIC?
Let's talk about WITIC.
All right.
So one of the things that the FAA does, we have a program called the Weather Technology Information in Cockpit. So that's what WITIC stands for, but it's kind of like any acronym, whether it's a government one or not. We always find a way to pronounce it, and because otherwise it gets a little bit too unwieldy. This is a program that is looking at the fact that we have this technology, but how do we make sure that we are getting the most of it and using it as best we can? One of the issues that this group looks at, for example, and I thought this was quite interesting because it was something that I noticed early on, different manufacturers use different symbology. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was looking at websites and some of the earlier versions of portable handheld weather data, that I had to remember sometimes that the color you see on one doesn't translate to what you see on the other. And it's always the issue of, do you standardize or do you allow room for innovation? And I think we're trying to settle on that. But this, one of the things that this research program is looking to do is to figure out what is it that gets pilots' attention, what do people remember, what do they don't remember, and how can, so as you see in that first bullet point, to ensure that weather displays convey vital information effectively in a way that you're going to notice and get it.
Well, and this is all about managing information. Yep. We have a wealth of information that's available to us, but as gets developed later on in the program, we have to know how to interpret it and make sense out of the data.
We do.
I think our society in many facets is data rich and information poor.
Yes, indeed.
And I think that this is an attempt to sort out what does a pilot need and how does he interpret it at the right time to make the right decisions.
The other thing is this article on what is WITIC, and we're going to talk about this more in some of the other articles, but image latency, we won't spend a lot of time with that here, but this is a good place to introduce something they call WILD, which is actually a creative acronym, the Weather Information Latency Demonstrator. They actually have a gadget, and as you'll notice in the last bullet, some of the flight training device manufacturers are using that to try to help develop ways to better let pilots understand that what you see in front of you with a lot of the weather technology or weather information that we get, it's old information. It's news that you can use, but you have to know how to use it appropriately.
Well, and certainly it's easy to focus on some of the more obvious things like VMC into IMC, and that's certainly a goal of WILD, but there's certainly other scenarios. Continued flight into icing conditions is another one. how to manage and mitigate turbulence. All of these things are impacting the aeronautical decision-making process. And as pilots, we can sit on the ground and make plans, and we can use information to plan our flight, but now we have to fly our flight. And oftentimes we're making decisions on the fly, so to speak, using the information, and we have to be able to know, is the information telling us exactly what we need to know, or is it a little bit old, as the latency issue discusses? There's a bullet point in this article that is quite real. So what you see out the window is real, and what you see on your display is often delayed.
Yeah, I remember one time making a night flight, and I was able to see that because we were trying to avoid some precipitation. The convection had moved away. And what I saw on the weather data display and what I could see by just looking outside, it was dark, and you could see where the precipitation was by which parts of the city lights were obscured.
Sure.
And that was a really, I still carry that picture in my mind as a reminder of, oh yeah, it's over there now. Well,
and one of the other issues about understanding the latency of some of the display and some of the weather information, the article goes on to say that, the only real depiction of what's going on from a weather standpoint, particularly in T-storms, is onboard weather radar.
Exactly.
However, you have to know how to use that as well.
Yes.
And I've over the years have determined that although there are some guidelines, there is a little bit of art to understanding how to set up, use, and interpret your onboard weather radar as well.
I hear it's a fairly dark art.
A dark art, yes. It's a dark and stormy night.
It's a dark and stormy night, which takes us to the next article. We have a lovely picture of a dark and stormy night. Please do not go flying in when there's lightning bolts out there. This is a what not to do kind of photo. It was a great picture, but let's put it this way. I don't want that to be me in my airplane.
Well, and it's really about... that I've written some articles and given some discussions on threat area management, which is we're presented with threats all the time. We have to make decisions about how to manage and mitigate them. And this is certainly one of them. There's, this philosophy of doing go, no-go decisions. Yeah. But once you're in the air, that go, no-go really it really turns into kind of a start continue. And what is my option B, C, or D, which I think we always have to have an out for. But a lot of this about making good decisions is really about mitigating risk.
Exactly. And this is the good decisions about bad weather. We have fun with titles like that because I think it's descriptive, but it also is catchy. We give you a little bit more information about WIDIC. It's one of the two weather research programs the FAA has, and we're reprise of what it's looking to do, including uncovering gaps in pilot training, getting a good look at what pilots' understanding are, and in addition to providing some information that can hopefully help manufacturers do something that is more standardized without stifling innovation or anything like that, is online courses to help instructors teach and to help pilots plan, and lots of good stuff, and also using that wild demonstrator that we talked about before.
And of course, another key part of this is we all learned a little bit about meteorology and how to read VTARs and TAFs and look at area forecast things when we did our private. And as we advance into our ratings, we have to advance our knowledge of weather and meteorology. If you're transitioning into an aircraft that can now fly in the flight levels, you'll have different weather events to manage. So part of, transition training and learning a new aircraft, that also needs to be supplemented with the weather that you might encounter because of the capabilities or lack of capabilities of the aircraft.
Yep. So lots of good stuff, although I hope that you will continue to fly GA because from what I understand, you're now zipping along in this little Lear well above.
Well above a lot of the weather.
Yeah.
Zipping is right. But we eventually have to, what goes up has to come down.
And you have to come back down through it. And
That's right.
you do fly Bonanza around here. So
yes.
All good.
Okay. Shark Tank.
Yeah,
I think I've seen the show a couple of times, but I don't think that's what this is about.
No, but the FAA, as we put it here, took a bite out of the concept to promote and encourage some innovation. This was fun. We had FAA employees submit, we got more than 65 ideas. I'm not sure what the exact number was, but it was a lot. And then 5 finalists, just like they do on the TV show, pitched their innovations to a group of executives for to see who was gonna get the go ahead. And the winner was somebody who came up with this idea of increasing the turbulence observations using data points and modeling and that sort of thing. And so these are things that are all being fed in, and you see at the bottom of the last bullet point there some of the potential uses for this tool. And I don't know for a fact that we might be doing this again, but I hope we do, because I think it is some good stuff.
And I mean, that's every pilot's dream, I think, is to have an idea about where the turbulence is and
absolutely.
and how they can avoid it. But reading about the graphical turbulence guidance. And again, as we've said, it's all about getting the data and then having somebody know what to do with the data.
Yeah. Then in our last issue, we talked about data and information, and we'll talk about it some more in here.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. Susan, you picked up an article and talked about crowdsourcing.
I did.
And related that to this very topic. So
crowdsourcing seems like a funny word to use at a time when we're doing social distancing. Crowds are bad, except that virtual crowds are fine. I was trying to figure out, because we wanted to write about encouraging people to give PyReps, and at the time that I wrote this piece, I had just come out of the Christmas season, and I was thinking, how can I write about PyReps in sort of a different way? And it just dawned on me, crowdsourcing is what PyReps are really about. It's about people who are actually out there sharing information. Just as when I was doing my online Christmas shopping, I was looking at the reviews to see what people said about things before I went ahead and bought it. Well, this is your opportunity to get I was there, and never mind what the manufacturer said, never mind what the seller says, this is what it's really like out there. So I kind of adapted the crowdsourcing concept to PyReps. There are a couple of really important points that we wanted to make here. One is, if you look at that third bullet, in aviation, as in shopping, it works when there's an actual crowd offering information. So I've tried to think about this as just your basic citizenship. If you use it, you should contribute to it.
Well, my former instructor at the small airport west of Madison here, Field Maury, who I've talked about before, he made a point of telling us in our instrument training that on every instrument flight we should give a PyRep. Even if it's a negative PyRep or something that's relating good information. It doesn't always have to be relating turbulence or ice or temperatures or this. It can just be, it's a good PyRep. And
that's one of the points that we make in this article, that PyReps, if you're telling somebody that, hey, there's no danger here, even though they may have read in the forecast that there might be, that is absolutely valid information. So what we also wanted to get across in this article is the fact that you have a lot of ways that you can make PyReps, but I think sometimes, I know this was true for me, that as a relatively new pilot, the formats seem to be awfully intimidating. And please do not be intimidated by the format. The information is important. If you call somebody and say, hey, I've got a PyRep for you, provide the information that you have and just use the basic who, what, when, where, and why format. On the other end of the system, they will put it into the format that it needs to be in. But what you can contribute and what only you can contribute is, this is what it was like for me. And the other thing I've certainly learned in a lot of flying is that there may not be a PyRep
in the area that you're interested in when you want the information. But if you're talking to ATC, you can sometimes get information out of ATC. For example, you have any top reports?
Yep.
That can give a lot of relief to what you're about to do as an instrument pilot if you know that the tops are, at 7,000 rather than something unreachable. So sometimes ATC, they have knowledge of this, but they're only going to have knowledge of it if you've passed that information along. And many of us have been on flights where air traffic control might say to you, hey, we'd appreciate a top and base report, because maybe you're the first airplane in that area. Maybe he just came on duty. He's looking for information. And this is just, again, this is another data point in our sort of repertoire of trying to find out information about the weather.
And controllers are encouraged to ask pilots for PIREPs. Another point that we make here, when it's said, I want to be clear about this. As with shopping and reviews, read PIREPs with a critical eye. That does not mean to imply that pilots are going to try to sell you a bill of goods. This is not like online shopping where you have to be careful about what you're reading. This is the idea that we as pilots, most of us are not professional meteorologists. And I think the way I wrote it in the article is that what I might think of as, if I were a 787 pilot, what I might think of as light chop is probably going to feel really different if I'm in a Cessna 150. So be careful. Just when I say critical eye, that is, just use critical thinking, know what the information is and put it in the right context.
Well, and part of that data point that you have to give as a PIREP is what kind of an aircraft are you?
Exactly.
And that way it helps your colleagues behind you interpret the meaning of that. Sometimes you can just give an abbreviated PIREP. It's quite common that I may check on with a new center controller and just say my altitude and say smooth, light chop, occasional, turbulence, and just build that into my check on so that,
they've got the information.
There's a quick little piece of data.
Yeah, so, it doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah.
I think I've got in the center column there was a piece that I put in capital bold letters. Information is more important than format. So
yes,
please do remember and if you use PIREPs, and most of us do, then contribute. Be good to your fellow pilots.
Absolutely. Okay, this next article is fun for a variety of reasons. We've both traveled to the UK,
Indeed.
And there's something special about being in London and using the tube or the underground. And there's also something for those of you that have been to the UK, if you are on the curb and you're looking down at the street, there are signs that say, look left or look right, because we're going to probably look the opposite direction and set yourself up for an accident. But one of the things that you hear on the tube and the subways, I think the last time
mind the gap.
We heard this was maybe from Heathrow to Paddington Station, mind the gap. And what's that about?
Well, and Sabrina, she actually got a lesson on train technology, the history of train technology in the first couple of paragraphs. The fact that, over the years, pieces of the London Underground system were built in different ways. And so there are different distances between train cars and the platform, and that you need to mind the gap, is the way they say it. By the way, don't you have a British accent by now?
Not yet.
I'm
going to blend that in with my former Texas accent.
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
Please don't. But yeah, Sabrina she used that mind the gap, and she spent some time in the UK when she was in the active duty military. And she used that concept to talk about an issue that we've referred to in several articles, but this really dives into it. The fact that there is a gap between real weather that is displayed and or between the real weather and what you see. And that's simply because, and the article talks about what goes into processing. And take a look at that second bullet there. The National Weather Service needs 5 to 15 minutes to create the mosaic, because they're getting it from different sources. That's why they call it mosaic, and render it as a graphic. And then it could take another 5 minutes for it to reach the cockpit. So remember that you could be looking at something that is 20 minutes or more old, and weather doesn't sit around and wait until it gets transmitted and say, yeah, here I am.
No,
it kind of moves.
One of the things that I have often been inspired at or awed at is when we're flying in and around the summer T-storms, you can just watch them grow.
Yep.
At any altitude, you can see gaps close, you can watch the convection occurring, and you need to respect that and give it some distance. And it might be tempting to say, well, I see a 10-mile gap there, I'll just head for that. But that's a trap, and it's a threat. Well,
that was actually another of the lovely puns in this article, mind the gap. And thank you for queuing that one up. That it was mind the gap between the latency issue, but it's also, if you think you see a gap in the weather that's on the display, that gap may very well have disappeared by the time your airplane
arrives
up to it, and you may not have too many other options at that point. So this is, I hope that you've heard it, but we'll say it again and again. It really, really, really is important that when you have this kind of technology, first of all, know how to use it, know what its limitations are, but this is technology that you use strategically, not tactically.
Exactly. And there was a comment in this article about the timestamp of the information.
Yep.
And that does not necessarily mean, if you see a timestamp that was 4 minutes ago, that this is 4-minute data.
Right.
It could have been, that was the last time it received data.
Right.
For the complete picture.
So yeah, it doesn't include the time that it took to actually assemble the graphic and to then transmit it to the airplane. So the timestamp gives you some idea, but I would say that it's fair to take that with a very large grain of salt. And again, never try to use this tactically. But it's absolutely wonderful to have this information. It's just that you have to, this is kind of goes back to our point, you need to make sure that you understand what to do with it.
And make the right decisions.
And make the right decisions on the basis of it.
She winds the article up with a little note here. It says, it's a dangerous gamble, especially when weather is involved. And in gambling terms, weather is the house. And just as in the casino, the house always wins.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I didn't want to ask her too much about how she knew that, but
exactly. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. Moving on to the next one. This is fun.
Is it icicle?
It is icicle.
All right. What's it about?
So this is another one of those acronyms. This is one you don't have to worry too much about how to pronounce it, because what you see is what you get. But it stands for In-Cloud Icing and Large Drop Experiment. And in this, this is another part of what we were focusing on in this issue is some of the FAA's weather research and how it's being translated into real world terms. But in this case, terminal and national scale icing products, just as with turbulence, icing can be very, very hard to forecast, particularly some of the more dangerous kinds of it. So in this case, they took a Convair 580 twin engine airplane with just bristling with special instruments. Mm-hmm. And flew deliberately into icing conditions to measure. And please note that, and I made sure I put it on the slide, to enhance safety and allow for sampling, they operated over flat terrain. This was not carelessly done. It was
no, of course
very
not.
Carefully.
No, but they covered a wide range of altitudes.
Yes,
from as low as they could safely go up to the higher altitudes to look at icing.
And collected a lot of information that is then the people who do this go crunch data and figure out, what does it mean? What do we do with it? And the goal, as you see up there, is to support development of better terminal as well as national icing products that would actually provide more information than we've been capable of offering today. So,
and to kind of just bring a practical point about this, I think it was yesterday. It was yesterday.
Okay.
Flying into the Southern California area, the controller came on and gave us an icing report from a previous aircraft. And we asked him, well, how old is that report? And he said 15 minutes.
Oh boy.
So we thought, okay, as we went through that very same area, there was nothing. And it's just another point about showing that just like thunderstorms and weather and ceilings and visibility, it's all changing. And the icing report that you may get might be appropriate and valid for your situation, or there might be a no icing report and you find yourself in icing.
So let me ask you this: did you give him a no
We did.
icing pirate? Oh,
We
very
did.
good.
We
Gold
did.
star.
Yeah,
All right.
we said that we didn't encounter any icing, gave him the temperature, and carried on.
Great.
But this is interesting because certainly there's for pilots and especially instrument pilots, there's probably nothing that's gets our attention. Maybe thunderstorms get our attention more, but icing certainly does.
Well, I always think of icing. The ice belongs in drinks, but not on airplanes, because this is a recipe for coming back to Mother Earth, and not in a good way, because it decreases lift and increases the weight. And if you go back to private pilot ground school about lift equals weight and thrust equals drag, if you want to maintain straight and level on accelerated flight, you don't have to do much math to realize that when one is decreasing and the other is increasing, this is not going to work out very well.
And so this research is, I think the culmination of it will be to give access to a lot better tools to try to predict this.
So, and thank goodness for people who are willing to go out and play in the ice, because I'm not one of them.
Yeah, it's a bit like the hurricane hunters.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for them.
It's fun to read about it, but I don't think I want to be aboard.
No.
Okay.
Next one is basically about cameras.
It is.
Alaska Omnipresence.
Omnipresent. It's kind of fun because I was saying to Paul and others earlier, the last few days of my working life have been spent with a lot of video meetings where you are seeing people on screens, and it's that gift of being and seeing elsewhere. So we're all in different places scattered across the country, but seeing each other's faces. Also getting some interesting views of people's work from home attire. It's all kind of fun. Anyway, this is about weather cameras. We have had for a number of years weather cameras, a big network of them in Alaska. And this piece is about what the FAA is doing to expand that program. And is there anything in there that caught your eye?
Well, I've never had the opportunity and privilege of flying in Alaska, but I've certainly known people who have. And I often hear stories about how quickly the weather can go from good to bad. But I have had a fair amount of experience over the Rockies and in Colorado, and I used to tell people that the mountains make their own weather.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
The mountains make their own weather, and those of you who are familiar with flying on the Front Range, within a 5-mile span, it can be windy and gusty down to nothing, no wind and anything, just because of how quickly it changes. But I gather that the goal of this is to expand this into other states and use existing infrastructure to help support it.
Well, it started off because Alaska is rugged territory, depends heavily on general aviation, but trying to have the kind of weather reporting station network that you have in the lower 48 has never been really an option. So we started this weather camera program, and you see now we have 230 in 178 sites. Various camera views, current conditions, comparative clear day image, so you can see what it looks like when it's not obscured. And I suspect that could be pretty compelling in some cases, because you're looking at the clear day view of where the mountains are. And then the 6-hour loop to show the trends. So this has been an enormously successful program. And it's allowed people, this is why the title Omnipresence is kind of fun, that it has allowed pilots to really see places and actually get PIREPs in a way that where we don't have either weather reporting stations or pilots going through. So you get a sense of what's going on. So for a long time, I think the FAA has been interested in expanding the program, but there's expense and there's maintenance and there are all sorts of logistical issues. But we have come up with some ways to do that, partly due to the fact that technology is better. We've got more rugged, less expensive cameras that can do all sorts of really neat things. So now we're looking to do Hawaii, 23 possible sites, technical installation solutions. I'm sure some of those can be fairly complicated. But then the other thing that I think is very intriguing is that the agency has started to collaborate with state and municipal governments
to use already existing
camera networks, because we all know that municipalities and states do have camera networks. And if there are ways that we can integrate into that, and we've got some cooperative agreements either in progress or just freshly done. So lots and lots of possibilities. So this is definitely something to keep an eye on.
It's great information. So how's your weather knowledge? I think is the next one.
Yeah, actually, yeah, this is what's your weather know-how?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a little bit, it goes through a framework that I have used for a number of years. One of my colleagues wrote the piece, but I think what we really need to do is consider not only the shelf life, but think about things in terms of those basic elements: temperature, wind, humidity, turbulence, aircraft performance, all of those things. This is a short piece that tends to tie together a lot of the concepts that we've used in the rest of the articles.
Yeah, it's a good review, and it's something we have to deal with on every flight, even if the weather's good. I mean, that's data we need.
Well, if the weather is good, it's data we need. I know that, one of the things that I always think of when the weather is good, I look at the sky and I look and see how many empty tie downs there are on the ramp. And that tells me that I need to look out for aluminum kind of weather.
Yeah.
To make sure that there's no
That's right.
unauthorized swapping of paint and unbriefed formation and that sort of thing.
So I think our next one is the typical article on
this is
from the helicopter group.
Vertically speaking, yes.
And it's about staying safe and avoiding IMC, basically.
Yeah, and helicopters have the ability this talks about a program that the Helicopter Association International has been promoting for a long time. They call it Land and Live. And that if there are hazards, that what you do is you can put a helicopter down in a lot of places that, say, airplanes like you and I fly don't really have that option. So don't try to power through it. Just put the helicopter in a safe place until the weather gets better, and then.
And from the data, it looks like since this program has been in place, there has been a reduction. There has indeed been a reduction.
The person who, until recently, unfortunately, Matt Zuccaro, he passed away recently. He was the longtime CEO of the Helicopter Association International, and he pioneered this program, actually. Mm-hmm. He had a lot of experience. He had both military and other civilian helicopter flying experience, and he was very, very passionate about trying to do something to improve rotorcraft safety. And he came up with this program. I won't say it on a potentially family program, but let's just say he had a more colorful title for it. And they have translated it into Land and Live, and it's been going on for quite some time. So,
and there's about 8 little comments in here about the 8 golden rules. I'll go through them quickly. Always obtain a forecast. Expect conditions to be worse than forecast. Check the actual conditions against the forecast. Identify alternative routes. Always carry enough fuel. Scan the sky and horizon for possible problems. Check the weather. Be prepared to divert. Those apply to fixed wing too.
I was going to say, there's nothing special about helicopters. Those are good rules for everybody.
That's right.
Even if you don't fly those, follows the same rules.
Absolutely. FAA Faces, an interesting gentleman with a lot of contributions to aviation safety.
Yeah,
Ian Johnson.
He's the human factors lead, and he and his team contributed a great deal to this publication. We spent some time with them on the phone and in interviews and other things, and let me tell you, they are truly passionate about what they do. In this case, this guy. He started flying a long, long time ago, took like a lot of people, several jobs to pay for flying lessons, he thought he was going to be an airline pilot, but decided he was more interested in some other areas. So he flies, but now he does weather research. He combines a lot of different things, and he and his team are really key to improving weather information safety for all of us. So we don't usually give people too many options. We essentially tell them, you're going to be the FAA face, answer these questions, and send a picture. And anyway, but they were very cooperative.
Well, and one of the best lines in his article is, with great technology comes great responsibility, which is what this has been about, is to know how to use the technology.
Absolutely true.
Okay. Next we have looking at
post-flight
data mining.
Data, yeah. Well, this is data and information again, and I mentioned when we were chatting before the broadcast started. I use a quote in the beginning from Commander Data of Star Trek Next Generation. Some people may be familiar with it. You should watch that one.
I like the old ones.
I know. But I had this lovely picture of Commander Data looking very quizzical, and we weren't able to use it for copyright reasons, but that's kind of where it came from. This is all about the fact that we have a lot of data, and that what we talk about is data. Data has to be put into some context to become information that we can then analyze. Mm-hmm. And if we try to take it without the context, we're distorting its meaning. So another thing that I talk about in this piece is I've talked about it before. I was very, very, very affected years ago by Robert Buck's weather flying book. And these three things that weather can do: wind and turbulence, which is really a pilot and an airplane issue, ceiling and visibility, which is more of a pilot issue. And then the last one is affect aircraft performance, because when you have icing, density, altitude, convection, that sort of thing, I always say that you could be super pilot. Even if you don't have a super airplane, the airplane, you can't compensate for what the airplane can't do. So this is just all about a data-driven world, but don't let data drive you into trouble. So
it's a good advice. Yeah.
So hopefully people will take that.
Yeah. You've met the new administrator. And
we had a lot of fun with that. So what you're seeing on the screen there, straight from Steve, FAA employees are very familiar with that, because one of the things that he does is a weekly internal, it's usually about 3 minutes. He calls it Straight from Steve. He films it on his iPhone, and it comes out to employees. And it's really, he's thinking about the one that we got last week. Some of you may have heard that the administrator has self-quarantined because of possible exposure. So he filmed the Straight from Steve weekly comments to employees on his sofa. So there he was sitting there. It was really fun to meet him. He's very much a people person. Although he does not have a strong GA background, he's definitely interested. And he told us right away the story of how enthralled he was by his first GA flight experience way back when.
Weren't we all?
Yeah. And at the time he was in at the academy, and they didn't exactly give him a lot of extra time to go play with GA airplanes. So he's done a lot of different things. He came to us from not only he had been a pilot for many years for a major air carrier, but also in the management. So he's done a little bit of everything, and he's one of the more, he's a very accessible person. You see him in the halls, gets coffee, takes Metro, not these days, but nobody's taking Metro right now. But he also said that he's something of a history buff, so being in Washington is a really great experience, and hopefully the museums will open again soon, and we can all enjoy them.
Well, he's very engaged in what's going on in the organization, so that's a good thing.
So it's fun.
Good. Our next one is the drone debrief about remote IDs, and the big statistic I see there is 1.5 million.
That's a lot, yeah. This article, we wanted to make everybody aware. There is a proposal. I can't remember if it just closed, but it is the remote ID notice of proposed rulemaking. I can tell you that we have received a lot of comments, and that it will take time for the FAA to go
Sure.
through them and disposition them. So this was just a little bit about the rationale for some of the proposals.
Okay. January 1st, 2020 is come and gone.
It has come and gone.
ADS-B is either in your airplane or it's not. And this article is about what happens if it's not.
Well, if it's not, or if it is not working, the FAA did anticipate that there would be a need to allow some exceptions periodically. And so we have another one of these really fun acronyms. I don't know who comes up with some of these, but this was fun. ADAPT, ADS-B Deviation Authorization Pre-Flight Tool. So the article talks about where you can go, but also some of the basics of how you can request that you be allowed to fly in what's called rule airspace without the appropriate equipment. But it is very important to note that, first of all, this is not meant to be a habit. If you haven't equipped and you're hoping to use this every time, that's not going to work. And second, you can ask, but the answer may be no,
Sure.
even if you follow all the rules, because the whole idea was we needed to allow for occasional exceptions, but this was not about allowing people to not equip and then just continue along as they were.
And Susan, on the next page of that article, kind of takes you through just a simple process about how to go through it. So if you're in that situation and you need to make a specific request, this article will kind of show you the roadmap on how to do that.
Yep. And telephone or while in flight. So this is another one of those things you also have to, it's called a pre-flight tool for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
That if you make the request by calling on the phone, or if you call them while you're flying around and say, oops, sorry, I don't have ADS-B, can I get through? The answer is definitely going to be no.
Yeah. All right. Our next one is nuts, bolts, electrons, and it's there for the maintenance folks. And essentially, it's about recurrent training. And training is what we talk about. We spend a lot of time talking about pilot training, but it's equally as important for the maintenance and mechanics. And this article lists some of the resources that are available.
And there are quite a few. There is an AMT continuing education program on safety.gov. There's what we call the maintenance hangar. There are a number of maintenance and human factors courses that, because human factors, we're all human, and those are relevant to everybody. So these are not courses just about literally nuts and bolts, but also about the human factors side. So the article provides some links to resources and just provides some tips on where you can go to get some of the recurrent training that might be needed. It also makes another plug, as we've done on the pilot side, for type clubs, maintenance-related associations, and gosh, there's so many of them. There are lots of different organizations that you can be part of, and I know that the ones that I belong to are very valuable, because not only do you get useful information, but you get to talk to people who speak your language.
Sure.
And are willing to do hangar flying.
You bet. There's always something to learn from those.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We have two articles always on medical topics, and the next one is certainly timely, and it shows that there's been a lot of progress. What to do if you're a pilot with diabetes, and it used to be you were mostly out of luck, but there's been a lot of progress, and Mike Berry goes through some details about talking about some of those advances, especially with the advent of real-time glucose monitoring, which has made this more successful. Yeah,
this was, I learned a lot from looking over this one too. Insulin-treated diabetes, as you said, that used to be a disqualifying condition, and there wasn't too much way around it. But now there is a protocol. Notice that there's no effect on basic med or sport privileges, but and there's some information there. It's an option for class 3, which you can continue to use that. But this is if you need a class 1 or 2 medical certificate. That what we've tried to do, even though Canada and the UK, some people complained that they were ahead of us. They had a protocol, but it was fairly restrictive in a lot of ways. And we're using this continuous glucose monitoring to allow for some things that are we can get an issuance without some of the restrictions that previously existed. So I know that my colleagues are hoping that this would become a template for other ICAO member states to use. So
no, it is good stuff, and I've certainly have known some individuals who were working through this, and this seems like a step in a very positive direction.
Indeed.
The next one is something that perhaps we've all experienced in some form or fashion, which is spatial disorientation. As an instrument pilot, we're taught that if there's some disagreement between what you feel and what you see, you can have spatial disorientation. But I used to get it in a simulator sometimes.
Oh wow!
I'd be sitting in the back of a simulator, and of course the problem with level D simulators that are motion is that your eyes are seeing the visual, but your ears are not following. And I won't say many times, but certainly it's been a case where when I'm maybe taking notes, I look up and I think, oh my gosh, I've got the leans. And my solution to fixing it is to look at the instruments.
Stare at the instruments. Yeah, this is about how the article talks about some accidents that occurred that were probably spatial disorientation, and in VFR and IMC, this is often an issue. So this is just some basic tips and reminders, and also some resources.
And I think also that there are certain situations that are more of a setup for spatial disorientation than others. One that comes to mind is reasonably low ceiling, maybe 500 to 1,000 feet. You're taking off, you're accelerating, and maybe flying a departure procedure, which gives you a turn. So you're climbing, you're accelerating, you're turning. You really need to be focused, because that's for me a classic setup. And it sort of gets into, if you see those conditions, treat that as threat error management, and how am I going to mitigate this?
And how are you going to mitigate?
For sure. Well,
as we're wrapping up,
we're getting close. There's the ATIS, which is the sort of news roundup.
Yeah, there are a couple things in here. Incursion avoidance videos, revised AC on ADS-B, you notice the maintenance procedure cards, but also wanted to mention the charter guidance, because the FAA is trying to address illegal charters, and some of it is providing information to potential passengers about what to look for to know whether or not somebody is a legitimate charter operator. So safety matters a lot.
Well, and by coincidence, back to runway incursions, two of the airports mentioned there, I was just at this past week, Bedford, Mass, and Teterboro, New Jersey. They have some gotchas that you need to pay attention. Before you start taxiing, it's a great idea to pull your chart out and review where you're going.
Yeah, and these days with your apps, you can even write the taxi route, just take a highlighter and highlight it, which is one of the things I do.
That's right. The Roll of Honor is kind of a tribute to people who have made certainly impact.
Once a year, we publish a list of those who have qualified for and received the Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award, but also the Charles Taylor Master Mechanic Award. So we just consider that a roll-up of those who have really come to an achievement that many of us can only aspire to, I think.
Well, I just happened to glance through the Roll of Honor, and I noticed that my former colleague and friend from the FAA and the Chicago FSDO was listed as a recipient. Tom Kirsten. Tom and I worked together in my airline connection for 18 years.
Long time.
And I've known him and worked with him, and he well deserves this award. So for him and all the others, congratulations.
Yeah, it's our way of trying to recognize them publicly, in addition to the ceremonies that they benefited from earlier. So
sure. And the next part is about feedback.
Yeah.
I know that I saw that you had some feedback about an article that you had written, and there's some others there as well.
Yeah, there's some more there. We really enjoy getting feedback. We maintain a regular watch on the mailbox. Sometimes we respond to people directly. If it's appropriate, we publish the letters, but these are two ways that you can easily reach us. And the next slide is the usual how to find us.
Well, how do we find this? Because we hate to be lost.
We hate to be lost or temporarily, even momentarily unsure of our position.
Yes.
So this is the website, how you can find us. It says free download in these formats. I want to make a little announcement here. We're going to be suspending the EPUB and MOBI formats because we monitor how many downloads we're getting. We're finding that the PDF gets us a lot, but also we're doing Adobe Spark links. So if you're looking for us, we still have lots of formats, but the individual article formats are pretty easy.
And the archived issues are available as well.
Absolutely.
So May and June, I see some things that make me think about communication.
Aviation communication is the theme. We're wrapping up that issue right now, and we'll set the date for our next broadcast once we have the publication in hand.
That's great. And just as a reminder, get Wings credit, get the print edition, answer the questions, and stay safe in your training.
All of those things. There's how you can get to us, and you can also use Google to get to us. So there we go.
All right. Well, Susan, it's always been fun. For our viewers out there, stay safe, be kind to each other.
Stay healthy.
And look for us next time.